All right, for this video, I wanted to talk with you about the U.S. tax issues for E-1 visa holders that are entering the U.S. So when we look at the E-class of visas issued by the U.S. government, we're generally looking at two, right? So we have E-1 and E-2 visas. The E-1 visa is issued to someone who's not a U.S. person and they are a citizen or resident of a country that has a treaty with the United States. So the E-1, it's referred to as an E-1 treaty trader visa. This allows someone to physically enter the U.S. to conduct international trade. Now, in contrast, the E-2 is a treaty investor visa. So if you're a resident of a treaty country and you're going to invest substantial capital in the U.S., you can travel to the U.S. to live and work in the U.S. and operate a business, okay? So E-1 and E-2 treaty countries, they can be found on the State Department website. There's a link here. I'll put that below in the description so you can go look at that. So back to the tax issues. Well, what are the tax issues for an E-1 visa holder? Well, when you have an E-1 visa, it's a non-immigrant visa, right? So it doesn't automatically make you a U.S. tax resident. So U.S. tax residents are U.S. citizens, U.S. green card holders, and then individuals that are physically in the U.S. enough days to meet that substantial presence test. And this is where E-1 visa holders normally fall into, that third category. So E-1 visa holder will become a U.S. tax resident if they are physically present in the United States enough days to meet that substantial presence test. Now, if you don't meet the substantial presence test, you're not a U.S. tax resident, but you're very likely still going to be required to file a U.S. tax return. You'll file a Form 1040-NR, a non-resident return, and you'll report whatever U.S. source income you have there. You'll pay tax on that, but you're not a U.S. tax resident. And the distinction is very important because when you become a U.S. tax resident, you're now filing U.S. resident returns, you're doing FBARs, you're doing all of this reporting, you're paying tax on your worldwide income, versus non-residents are only paying U.S. taxes on that U.S. source income. And they don't have to do FBAR filings, you don't have to do foreign financial asset disclosures, none of that. So big difference. Always keep in mind the distinction between being a U.S. resident for tax purposes versus a non-resident. Now, what if you are in the United States enough days to meet the substantial presence test, but you're trying to override it, right? So there is a closer connection exemption, right? And what this is designed to do is if you meet the substantial presence test during a year, you can file the closer connection exemption via Form 8840 to, in effect, override that U.S. residency. Now, generally, this is not going to work for E-1 visa holders because they're going to be in the U.S. more than 183 days per year. So the substantial presence test is a 183-day calculation, but it's current days in the current year, and then it's a portion of the days from the prior 2 years, right? And so what'll happen here is if you are, let's say, more than 120 days in the year, but under 183, you might meet that substantial presence test, and you can perhaps override it through the 8840. But the 8840 is not available if you are in the U.S. more than 183 days in that current period. And this is where most of these E-1 and E-2 visa holders, they're in the United States enough days to where they can't use the closer connection exemption, but in some cases you can. So, very important, if you're in the U.S. as an E-1 visa holder, always count your days. Make sure that you are tracking whether or not you meet the substantial presence test. If you meet the substantial presence test in a current period, but you're under 183 days for that current year, you might be able to override the U.S. residency with this closer connection exemption form. Okay, so that covers it. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment below. And I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thanks so much.